I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
All right, so it's 3 o'clock on my clock here, so we should be going live any second here. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jayatri, Chief Bioscientist at the Franklin Institute. And thanks for joining us today. We've got a fantastic conversation planned today. Those of you who tuned in last month, we had a really interesting discussion with folks involved in mental health and thinking about how mental health, physical health, and community connections all come together in thinking about the health of people in Philadelphia. And our conversation today is kind of a really exciting follow-up to that, because we hinted at a lot of innovative solutions that people are thinking about to solve these problems, particularly those facing the millennial generation. And today I am joined by 4 of these amazing innovators who are going to talk about some really cool solutions to this problem of mental health and millennial health in Philadelphia, kind of what inspired it, the connections to their science, and what visions they have for taking their ideas into the future. So we'll throw a couple of links in the chat for those of you who want a little bit more background on some of the things that we're talking about. But to give some context to what brought this group together, the Well City Challenge was a competition that just wrapped up this last week. And actually, it's probably better to say that it's just going through its great launch, in fact, because this is really just the beginning for all of you. But this particular challenge was a competition for community solutions to some of these issues facing millennial health that we'll talk about in a minute. And through a fantastic competition and a lot of hard work, these are among the winners of the competition, and we'll talk about their ideas. But the idea here is to really bring new voices to the table, to think about how everybody's lived experience can generate ideas when you come together in ways that maybe science and technology on its own doesn't always do well. So we'll get into all of these questions, but first let me introduce each of you. So first, I'll just kind of go around as you're on my screen. Yushan Joe and Karen Cervera, you're from Let's Talk Philly Conversation Circles. Then Nicole Kenny is from Hey Auntie. Gianna Murdoch is from Freedom Greens and Gardens. And the other 2 teams that were in the competition but weren't able to join us today, I do want to recognize them as well. And Mackenzie Nash was from Sheer Balance, and I realized that I don't have my last person on my sheet, so maybe one of you can help me out. Who is our 5th competition?
Takia McClendon from Strides.
Thank you, Takia. Yeah. I'm sorry, you dropped off of my bullet list here. I apologize. So yeah, we'll talk about some of their projects as well as we get into all of the different ideas that were at play. But as we get started, I just wanted to, again, lay the groundwork for some of the challenges to health that underlies each of your projects. And this was, part of a report on millennial and mental health that came out in the last couple of years. And some of the high-level trends that are of concern from this report, one is just the overall state of health. That looking at millennial health, we see this overall decline in overall health that starts at age 27. So, kind of what's going on that leads us along this path. Another trend that emerged from this data were that of the top 10 health conditions that were affecting millennials, 6 of them involve behavioral health, things like depression, substance use, hyperactivity, and that, of course, goes along with physical health conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Another trend that was observed is that the prevalence of these conditions is increasing. So things are getting worse, not better, and certainly the pandemic didn't help that. And this particular trend of behavioral health and physical health isn't, they're not two separate things. What we know from science is that having a condition in one increases your risk for the other, and going both ways. So these are all intertwined, even though we don't all the time think about them as being one and the same. And particularly of interest here in Philadelphia is that behavioral health often goes underdiagnosed in communities of color, whether it's from barriers to care, lack of cultural understanding among providers, or just cultural stigma in our own communities. So that's just some of that high-level data that's emerged out of these studies on millennial health. So let me turn it over to you. When you started thinking about entering the Well City Challenge, what was your reaction when you saw these data about millennial health? And feel free to jump in, whoever wants to chime in first here.
Okay, so I will say I was very surprised because the people I know all take care of themselves, like they do exercise and then they eat healthy. But I mean, for me and Karen, we represent immigrant communities, and then we know when immigrants immigrate to United States, I mean, like we have the access to fat food we don't used to have when we at home, and then also we are not we don't walk too much, because here you always drive your car to go somewhere, and then so it decrease our physical activities. Because when I remember when I was in Taiwan, I always walk to everywhere, but here, I mean, if you don't have a car, you don't have a leg. Yeah, because you drive everywhere.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting observation. On one hand, it sounds like in Taiwan, a lot of these habits were just kind of built into your lifestyle. And it sounds, what you were saying about, we think about people like really exercising and eating healthy food. It feels like, there's a lot more planning that has to go into that, in our culture here, that it doesn't happen kind of as organically.
Yes.
Yeah, and to chip in what Yushan is saying, I mean, I think it's surprising in one way, because you are like, okay, it is not just me, there are many people that are being affected by this. And for others side, I would say it's not very surprising, because, there are all these trends that we all face when we move to a new country. There are all these barriers, like Yushan mentioned, there's isolation and the language barrier acquisition, all of these, and like you say, like you mentioned, Jayatri, affects our wellness, because if one area of our life is not working well, then everything else is just messed up. So of course, like seeing all this information about anxiety and depression going up is just just like the surface of what is going on behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would chime in and say I wasn't surprised by the data at all, and especially over the past 6 years with my own company. I've been doing a lot of work around emotional and mental health in women. And so first of all, me as a millennial experiencing anxiety. So that's why I was like, yes, this is real. But then also too, the work that I was doing with women and women of color and Black women specifically, I was hearing this a lot. So I constantly been thinking about ways to eliminate the barriers to care and how to create more opportunities for access and really how to innovate. And so when the Well City Challenge became available, to me, it was really just the perfect opportunity. And it was exciting that they were engaging community to come up with those solutions, because like my colleague just mentioned, so many of us are living this day to day, and we're talking to these communities day to day. So it was just an exciting opportunity to have a platform to really bring to the forefront conversations I had been hearing day in and day out.
I'll piggyback off of Nicole in saying that because most of my work over the last 7 years has been rooted in marginalized urban communities, I too have been working directly with so many young Black women who are millennials, who have young children at home, who are suffering with depression and anxiety on a daily basis. I already knew that. They were already telling me that. So that wasn't a surprise. But understanding the trajectory based on the data, and also knowing from my perspective how the obscene access to unhealthy foods is fueling that entire cycle of, you know, increased access to these unhealthy foods, leading to type 2 diabetes and more heart disease. That vicious cycle just, I mean, it just wrenched me. And I just knew that I had to, you know, submit and hopefully be a part of this to make sure that demographics perspective was represented. Because a lot of times when people think about millennials, they're not necessarily thinking about young parents and young mothers or young future mothers, but there a lot of them are out there. So I wanted to make sure that they were represented in this conversation.
No, that's really fascinating. All of these different perspectives that you've brought up. I think, you know, certainly one important thing to remember is that, you know, millennials are united in age, but very diverse in almost, you know, every other way. And, you know, I'm hearing some really interesting reflections on, you know, what we call social determinants of health, right? The fact that our health is determined not just by our biology, but by our environment, and by our social connections. And to your point, Gianna, you know, we've seen data in Philadelphia that we actually have now as part of our Giant Heart exhibit about these discrepancies between neighborhoods, about things like access to fresh food that influence health. And so, you know, trying to connect these threads together, you know, there's so much messaging out there, you know, whether it's in the media or things like that about health and exercise, but recognizing that that's not available, you know, to everybody, and that there are so many other pressures that get in the way of people being able to, you know, to kind of follow through on, you know, whatever their intentions might be. I don't know if you have any reactions to that, you know, to that sort of perception versus reality conflict that, you know, I think faces us a lot.
Yeah, I do, because, you know, I mean, one thing that really resonated in what you just said is that, you know, a lot of times when we talk about access to healthy foods, what we're not really taking into consideration is the exorbitant access to unhealthy foods. And
That's
so
right.
where, you know, where we're talking about social determinants of health, and we're talking about access to green spaces, we're talking about the environment that so many people find themselves in. There's also a study here in Philadelphia that showed that in urban communities, we're talking about city communities that are populated mostly by people of color, that the average person has access to 20 or more stores where they can access unhealthy foods or unhealthy food products. So we're not just talking about food, we're talking about cigarettes, alcohol, all of these things that are just compounded in certain zip codes. This is not happening in Chestnut Hill or Mount Airy. That's actually where I live. So being able to, you know, live in one area and recognize it's vastly different than the community that I serve is really infuriating and upsetting. And so I'm a little bit on a tangent here, but
no, I actually really appreciate that tangent, Gianna, because, you know, one of the things that I had always heard was this concept of food deserts, right?
Right.
And as I learned more about that particular issue, like that's not the right term to use.
Not the
because
right term.
Like desert implies that there's nothing available, and
That's
in fact,
right.
as you say, it's really the opposite. That
Right.
there is a glut of food. It's just all the food that doesn't support health. But it's what's convenient, it's what's cheap, and how do we change that landscape? So I really appreciate that tangent.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's dire. I mean, it's a real critical need. And, you know, one thing I will say about the Well City Challenge that I was really, really excited and happy to see that they really did embrace all people of color, all women of color, to really address these issues because it's where it's needed. It's where the work and the focus needs to be.
Gianna, maybe you could just address a comment from our audience here. I've heard the term food insecurity. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Food insecurity refers to the fact that some people have to make a decision at the end of the month or when they go to pay their bills, whether to pay their rent, pay their electric, or to buy groceries to feed their family. So that distinction between being insecure, that food insecurity means where you have to make that choice versus where you don't have to make that choice. So that's actually what that terminology means.
Thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
We have another question, which I'm going to ask you to just bear with us, because the question is, have there been solutions discovered that actually work? And we're going to circle back around to that. But before we get to some of the solutions that you've all come up with, we're here as a science museum and we've talked about some data, but there are some interesting science concepts to me that I think underlie, what do these numbers mean? So what's a science concept, that's related to health that really that fascinates you, that kind of motivates your work? And Nicole, maybe I'll start with you.
Just coming off mute. So yes. So I really wanted to ground Hey Auntie in this concept, or this scientific term called allostatic load. And it is a public health term. And what it refers to is the chronic stress and the wear and tear, and the impacts that it has on the body over longer periods of time. And I wanted to talk about that specifically as we think about Black women, because the research shows that we all are experiencing chronic stress. That is clear. But to the points that you earlier mentioned, the institutional and structural inequities means that the chronic load is allostatic load is more extreme on Black women. And so when we're thinking about how to create coping strategies and how we have to think about solutions, being targeted, because we have to recognize that they're experiencing a larger burden. And so that's really what grounds my work, is recognizing, okay, I always say, if we want to fix unique problems, we need unique solutions. And so for me, Hey Auntie is an opportunity to be really targeted to the chronic stress that Black women are experiencing. And I would also say too, a lot of Black women don't even know that they are experiencing chronic stress. When I was doing a lot of the one-on-one interviews, what I would hear so much is, I could do more. I could do more. And I'm like, the research shows you're already doing the most, And so just helping, I love when you're talking about messaging, because I'm a communication strategist. And so the language that we use when we talk about these challenges is really important. And grounding that in science is really important, so that we don't blame ourselves for what are really institutional and structural challenges. So that's how the scientific term allostatic load has really informed my work with Hey Auntie.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating concept, because it's something that, like you say, people aren't necessarily aware of, because it's almost so ingrained in our lives. And I wanted to give an example of what that might look like, for health, just to help our audience understand the idea. Like, if you're thinking about your immune system, right? That, normally your immune system can fight off a cold, right? But if you have all of these other stresses in your life, normally our body responds to short-term stress. We respond to the situation and then that stress goes away. But when that stress doesn't go away, it affects the effectiveness of things like your immune system. And so you can't just fight off a simple cold anymore. And that can get more and more serious. So that's a really great example of how, mental health and physical health are very directly connected. What about you, Yushan and Karen?
So I will say, like, as immigrant, our science concept is occupation stress, because we come from different cultural backgrounds. So when we first arrive in US, there are so many things we have to learn, adapt it, and then to get used to, and all try to understand and respect the diversity. So all this makes us like feel stressed out, and then like maybe increase the the toxic stress, or like insecurity, or like anxiety. And then also, I think as immigrant, sometimes we try to understand like others, but the language barrier is always on the way. So that's like many immigrants try to overcome the language barrier and then try to make friends and make a connection or like integrated in the city. Yeah, but I will say like even though we saw like many data or many statistics from the scientists, but I think there are not many studies focused on immigrant millennials. Yeah. You are mute yourself.
Yes. I was actually looking through some of the literature, and it's interesting, learning about how language is kind of this linchpin of how we're connected to our societies, even as practical as, when you don't speak the language, it's harder to get healthcare. But also sort of that higher level is that, being an immigrant, not speaking the language, you don't have those social connections that we know are good for the brain. And there seem to be more studies on what's happening in teenagers and what's happening in older people in terms of brain health, but absolutely that's true for millennials as well. And how about you, Gianna?
You'd think we'd have this mute thing down by now, but it's just
it's always happens.
I know. Well, I would probably just go back to the fact that how heart diseases and diabetes have already been disproportionately impacting communities of color before COVID and before even understanding this new data that's come out about millennial health. And when we really look at the fact that I pulled up some data here where 44% of all African Black men and 48% of Black women are suffering with undiagnosed heart condition and high blood pressure and diabetes and these things. And we really recognize how the inequity, and that's already prevalent before these other things like COVID, like stress, like all of these other components, really looking at that and recognizing the importance and the focus of this work, right? Like, I mean, this is a crisis. I mean, Black health is under crisis in any case, and that this is just exacerbating it.
No, that's such an important point, that none of these trends that we're seeing, especially in communities of color being disproportionately affected by COVID, these aren't new. It's right. Just coming to the forefront in a way that I think had been kind of suppressed before. And so we really need to get to the root cause of these issues. And that's really a perfect segue to now thinking about, how do we work towards solutions? And somebody posted a comment, talking about some of the social services that are available at the state level or at the federal level to provide assistance for people to get access to healthier food. But the Well City Challenge was really focused on a different level of really community generated solutions. And I think that's what's really exciting about, the type of innovation that you're all doing, is that it's coming from your own experience. And certainly we need change at all levels to, from top down, bottom up, it's got to come, be everywhere. But we've kind of hinted at each of your projects so far, but let's get into it. Gian, what was your project? What was your idea that you pitched for the competition?
Yeah, absolutely. So my project is called Freedom Greens and Gardens, and Freedom Greens and Gardens is it's a destination for wellness in the heart of the community that needs it most. So it is a 4-stepped intervention, which really is rooted around the idea of having what we call the Get Fresh food box, which provides all of the plant-based staples that you would need to transition to and maintain a plant-based diet. That part of the concept really came about because of cooking classes that I had started throughout COVID. And first of all, realizing that I had a consistent turnout of about 20 to 25 people who were rooted in this community, who were interested in it. I mean, that first and foremost, it's something that I had always wanted to do, but didn't really wasn't sure who would be interested. And what I realized was that there were a lot of people who were interested, but marketing communications does not center Blackness. These kind of wellness initiatives are usually targeted to people who are more affluent, people who are not Black, and these practices are made to be inaccessible by the communication, but that also you can't find the ingredients in the neighborhood. So it's really frustrating if you are trying to be plant-based and you do want to eat a healthier diet to not be able to access these foods within your neighborhood. So the Get Fresh Daily Food Box is like it's like a food box delivery that provides you with everything that you would need to start a healthy diet, and then the recipes and cooking classes that again are super accessible to that community. So it's like just very culturally relevant and rooted in that community. And then also really having the touch point of the garden, which makes that community component also part of the experience. So it's like the virtual component as well as having the in-person component that again is rooted in nature.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, when you look at going back to that concept of social determinants of health, one of the statistics that public health experts look at is the distance to a grocery store from, you know, any particular neighborhood. And the data, especially in Philadelphia, is striking, you know, that grocery stores are not equitably distributed. And so, you know, something like, you know, what you're proposing is awesome, again, both because of the, you know, increase in accessibility, but also that community component.
And also, I just wanted to add, when we're like specifically talking about plant-based diets, Black Americans represent the highest trajectory of people transitioning to plant-based diets right now. So it's pretty startling that even if you do have access to a grocery store, it still doesn't mean that it's in a price point that's available to you, if you can find it at all. And so, you know, as a direct outcome of my experience, I had families who were traveling outside of their neighborhood. I actually, what really did it for me is that I had one family who was traveling to Cherry Hill, New Jersey to get some of these ingredients that we had on a very simplified menu or recipe. And I just hit the roof because you should not have to leave your neighborhood to have healthy food, period. And we're not talking about fast food. People who really want to create meals and learn how to do it, you shouldn't have to leave your neighborhood to do that.
And, you know, and of course, there's a whole layer of sustainability on top of that as well, which, you know, health of the planet, you know, comes down to that as well. And again, that affects, you know, neighborhood health in disproportionate ways as well when you think about environmental justice. And so all of these issues are very much intertwined. Yushan and Karen, maybe I'll turn to you next to share your pitch.
Sure. So I think one of the things we all have in common here is that we are here representing communities that are not being heard and communities that have needs that are not being met. And we will share that. And for example, in our case, we have met so many people that that share with us that they feel like their English is not good enough and they feel like I'm not good enough to be here. And these are people that are so skillful that in their countries they had these amazing jobs and they were artists, they were doctors, and they come here and they feel like I'm just not good enough to be here. And it sounds so familiar because we felt the same way when we just arrived here. So, and how that feeling impacts your overall life. You just feel like you are frozen here, that you don't have where to go. So our project was about targeting that, bringing people together, bringing the community together to talk about all these issues and connect with others, build relationship, all of this by practicing our English, you know, in a very safe and fun space where we just come and speak, and you know, where there is no prejudice involved. And you know, also talking about mental health, there is this huge prejudice and it is still a huge taboo in our community. So we need a different approach, because when people hear about clinical approach, it just feels so foreign and so aggressive for us. So what we so our project is Let's Talk Philly Conversation Circle. That is these groups of conversations of 8 to 10 participants that join and share about different topics, that share about resources in the city and develop this confidence and meaningful relationships, and also awareness about, you know, the wellness and the health part.
I just want to share a comment that's come through from somebody in the audience. Thank you for talking about how language barriers affect immigrants' health. I understand and speak English well, but I still struggled with understanding the healthcare system and how insurance worked when I first arrived in the US. Not knowing what to do added even more stress, affected my sense of well-being. This can be more difficult for immigrants who have limited English language skills. That certainly resonates with me as well. My parents were immigrants here, and so I saw that, you know, firsthand. And so I think you're really filling a need that, you know, that is so important for people who are new to this country. And then, you know, adding that language issue on top of that, that's really exciting. And Nicole, last but not least.
Yeah, so my idea is Hey Auntie, and Hey Auntie is an intergenerational wellness platform. We're really leveraging technology to create purposeful connections, whether that's through conversations, fitness, learning new life skills, and volunteerism. And what makes Hey Auntie specifically unique is that it is being designed centering Black women's unique experiences. And so I've spent most of my career, pretty much all of my career, working towards racial, gender, and economic equity. But 2 years ago is when I really became introduced to technology and how things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, algorithms, data, how all those things can help kind of optimize the work that we're doing. And so that's really the Hey Auntie concept in terms of connecting women is work that I was doing. But as I was learning about technology, I was thinking, okay, this is a way that I can accelerate it and scale it to make it more available to more women. And I call it Hey Auntie because, and I know this is in many communities, especially communities of color, auntie is a very affectionate term. Yeah, aunties are your safe space. They're the women you can go to, they don't judge you. And that was who my auntie is for me. But also too, which I might not have mentioned, is part of my work is also, I'm a fitness instructor. So I teach at the local YMCA, but I also had about 7 or 8 senior women, Black women, who I was also coaching on a personal level. And so, and I'm talking about women probably over the age of 60 and 70. And so within a week, I had all these aunties pouring into me every day. And the thing is that, you know, and Mackenzie had mentioned this, life is hard for everyone, right? And adulting is tough, and you can't Google it, you can't YouTube it all. But I learned through community, being around people who have more experience, a lot of times they can answer questions, you know, that can help alleviate some of that stress. And when they have shared experiences, especially as a Black woman, there might be things I might be ashamed to say, or I feel like I have to project a level of strength, so I can't talk about it. They created that safe space for me. And so that's really how Hey Auntie came to be, is they have been such a supportive system for me. So I wanted to make this opportunity available to more women. And I also mentioned it's also relative, because I'm apparently an older millennial. So there are younger millennials in my own community, Gen Zers, who I'm an auntie to, who I'm doing life with, you know, who I want to help them understand it's okay. You don't need to have it all together. You're doing great. And just giving them that level of assurance and hope so that they can just kind of move on and you know, take on the world and be proud of themselves instead of being just burdened down, which I feel like a lot of us are experiencing right now.
No, that's so important. I mean, especially as, you know, families move apart and things like that, you've got to build your own family. And so having a system like yours to provide that support network is so important. But I also want to touch on what you mentioned about like how we can use technology to tackle some of these problems. And I, you know, in the last year, with everybody being distanced, we've seen a lot of innovative uses of technology, but we've also seen how important it is to have more diverse scientists and users get involved in designing technology. because there are also, for every great thing that an algorithm can do for you, it also, we've also seen examples of how it, just takes our own human biases and, programs them into computers. And so, having more people, more from diverse backgrounds involved in thinking about what kind of solutions technology can provide is really important. So that's another angle, of your project that really resonates for me.
Jayatri, can I add something here too?
Yeah.
That each of our projects, which I really, really love, is really centered on community. And so this idea of really tackling health and health issues that are rooted in community is really, really essential. And I think it's a missing element from a lot of like public health perspectives that I've been working in this community for a very long time, and would be at the table and say, well, what about the human connection to this?
Yes.
That it is more than just about the data. We have to, in communities of color, and all of our varied communities. I mean, each of our communities here represented today, we are represent like our community and our family, that it means so much. And what I found with my project and doing the online cooking classes is that the community part, even though we were online, we were virtual, and really excited to be able to bridge that space. What I found was that I had a better connection with people than I had in person, because I was able to be in their homes and we're cooking together, even though we're in this virtual space. So it really became a space where people would just come to be together and kind of say, how are you today? And you can see your cat, and you can see the kids and see the babies grow up. But by centering it on our health, it's now we're coming together so we can be healthier together. And so, I just wanted to point that out. I mean, each one of us really our projects are all grounded, and even Takia and Mackenzie, who aren't here, their projects are also grounded in community.
I was just about to give them a shout out.
Yeah, shout out to to our people. But yeah, I mean, that's the common thread, people of color, and linking it to community. It has to be more than just the data and the science, because that alone does not work.
And so, yeah, just to give the very high level overview of the other two projects among the finalists. So Takia McClendon, she's the innovator behind Strides, which is a community-based running group. And really ground in the fact that anybody can participate in running, that it's all neighborhood based. You don't have to go somewhere else, that you can find that community and build those healthy practices right where you are. And then Mackenzie Nash, her project is called Sheer Balance. And this I thought was another fantastic idea, recognizing that salons and barbershops are often places of connection and relationship building, that providing mental health training for folks who work in salons and barbershops can often be that first point of contact, and how those relationships can support people in their journey to better mental health. And that's been a really important model, especially thinking about how to get information about COVID and vaccines across, those shops have been such an important point of contact with communities, that it's really exciting to think about, really broadening that out to mental health. So, great ideas from Takia and Mackenzie that again, really support that point you made, Gianna, that it is essentially community at the core of how we take care of ourselves with each other.
And Jayatri, if I might say it, I just have to say that I really love what Jana said, because I think that's the core of the thing. It's about the community, it's about the people. If you want to understand the problem, you have to hear to every story, every experience to really know what's going on. Because people can think what's going on, but if you don't talk to the community, if you don't talk to the people, you will never understand. So I think that's the beauty about our project, that they are just built in community. That's the core of our program. So
yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that's what got me excited about being. I've I'm an advisor on the Well City Challenge. So I've played a very small role, but one of the things that just excited me was this opportunity for community members to bring their own personal experiences into this opportunity for innovation. And so, just to give everybody a flavor of what your journey has been along the way here, you all, put an entry into the competition, and then you were among 15 finalists that were part of a pitch competition back in March, and you were the best of those 15, and then you entered this incubator to really help develop out your business plans, and then congratulations to all of you on a fantastic expo last week. So, hopefully you got some sleep after that. And a big congratulations to Nicole for being the grand prize winner there. But as we were saying, this is really just the beginning for each of you. So if you think about now, like innovation more generally, how does something like the Well City Challenge drive innovation in maybe a different way than what we maybe traditionally think about? Nicole, maybe I'll throw that question to you first.
Sure, no problem. So I think I use this popular quote, and I don't want to misquote the person who said it, but it's basically those closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And that's what I love so much about Well City Challenge, and that I think all of my teammates are speaking about so eloquently. This is our lived experiences. We're in the communities doing the work. We're hearing, what the challenges are. We're hearing what the solutions need to be. And so, the Well City Challenge was just so important. And I think could be really a model because they're really empowering those who are closest to the pain and the problem and giving them the resources to get the work done. And in a way that's sustainable. All of us, this is personal to us. We are very much invested in our communities thriving. And I think Well City really just positioned us to do this work and do it really well. So it's been it was hard. It was hard. But that's okay. I think we all we're cool with challenges, but I think they really equipped and prepared us in a way to really execute, to have real long-term impact. And for that, I'm really grateful.
I can jump in. I kind of find that I can always piggyback off of Nicole, because I guess from the Black woman's perspective, and just really recognizing and appreciating how specific our needs are, and how we haven't really, there's so much need, and to be in this space, and it's been pretty frustrating. I mean, to try to get funding, to try to really be heard, particularly when a lot of funding agencies and, the systems that are in place right now, they want data, they want proof. And you're just kind of like, I'm trying to get the proof, but I need the funding in order to prove that my model is a good one and that it is impactful and it cannot be sustainable. So it's kind of like you're always in this loop of, I'm applying for this funding. I know I need to collect data, but I don't have the funding to staff it. So that is why, to me, I will just forever, I will always be super grateful to the Economy League, Independence Blue Cross for this Well City Challenge, because it called for innovative solutions, and innovative solutions are the ones that typically are not getting funded. And, to be able to open it up and to, I feel super grateful to be heard, to be heard, and to not only just be heard, to be celebrated and elevated. And, this is why I said, but when we did our funders roundtable and we did our actual pitch, which was a week before you all saw it last Wednesday, I just got off and said, I've already won because of everything that we've learned, and to be able to have this perspective amplified is just huge. And the impact that it has had on the community that I'm already working with, like we were all heard. It wasn't just me. It's like everybody who I'm representing in West Philadelphia who's been cheering along the way. It's like, yes, finally, we're being heard. And so the Well City Challenge really gave us an opportunity to do that. I mean, and it's really been tremendous, honestly.
So as we wrap up, I'm going to throw my final question to Yushan and Karen first. What's going to be your measure of success and what's next?
You know, we have been asking this question to us as immigrants to come to the United States. Before I jump into the questions, I was just telling my friend, when I was in Taiwan, I'm a citizen, but we do have immigrants in Taiwan, but I never know how immigrants feel when they are in Taiwan. But when I came to United States as immigrant, that was my first wow. There are so many challenges and there are so many difficulties I have to face and I have to overcome. And then when I that position, and then I start with this project from like very personal needs, and then we deliver as what is innovation. I think it's not only about new ideas, it's new ideas and then the solution, and then you deliver to the community, and then this is all we do, all the like our teammates do. So I think this is the powerful among the people, because we have the sense to help people, and then we have the initiation to support the community among us. Yeah, so I think our next step is we will keep going, because we want to bring Let's Talk Philly to an organization, and then like everyone get involved. Like Jayana said, everyone can be heard. Their voice, their talents, and their skills can be recognized. Yeah.
I think that's such an important point you make about how, you know, your project really focused on, you know, what you saw in your community and bringing those perspectives. And I see there's like an interesting kind of balance between, you know, when we're thinking about like more systemic solutions versus more community-based solutions, is that yes, you know, systemic solutions can maybe have a broader impact, but one size doesn't fit all. And so, you know, where is this need for community generated solutions that really meet the needs of where you are? And then how can we think about maybe scaling those up, you know, going back the other way? And so there's the, you know, I'm not in the business world, so this is not something that I have a lot of expertise in, but I can see that all, you know, the wheels are turning in your heads already.
Yeah, and I will say to be heard means like everyone can get supported with the funding.
So hey, Auntie, you know, Nicole, what's next for you?
Yeah, so we're actually launching our first Hey Auntie event on Auntie's Day, which is July the 26th, so the Monday after next. And so our first topic will be the emotional phases of a millennial. So we'll have my auntie, actually, Dr. Deborah Darlene Roebuck, she's going to just talk through just the transition into adulthood, like what's going on. We want it to be an open and honest space for folks to just bring some of their concerns that they might have been afraid to say out loud, but that we're going to have addressed for that. We're also going to be announcing, we're going to have an aunties contest. We're going to have our first aunties experience. So we're able to partner with a hotel who's giving away a weekend stay, because we really want to celebrate our aunties. And then I'm also just going to be working on building the platform out. So we're hoping to launch at the top of next year, our beta version. So definitely look out for that. So it's a lot of work, basically, in short, a lot's going to be happening.
So everybody who's out there, you know, bring your aunties along, or if you are an auntie, you know.
Yes.
Join up.
Yes, for sure. Yep.
And Gianna, how about you?
Yeah, so I was actually able to take the winnings from the first round of the challenge to build out my garden space. So I was able to build out phase 1 of our garden. So we're right back at it to continue the build out of the garden. We're going to be doing some small events over the summer, but really looking forward to the fall being like the grand opening when our little garden like really blooms. Like now it's all little plantlings. I'll be launching a pilot of the actual food box in the fall with a really small group, and also building out my online platform for all of the access to plant-based 101s and how to shop and how to cook, and also those cooking classes. So I mean, we're not skipping a beat. It's just this has just given me the fuel that I needed to double down and just just make it happen.
Well, congratulations to all of you. I know it's been an incredible amount of hard work, but how inspiring to hear, each of your stories about how you're taking your own experiences, all of this, expertise that you've gained, and really bringing solutions to your community. And so thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us today. We really appreciate it. And we wish you the best of luck with your ventures. And thanks to everybody who is joining us today. We hope that you'll take the opportunity to learn more about each of these awesome projects. Again, we'll put the link to the Well City Challenge in the chat. And take care and be healthy yourselves. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Jayatri. Thanks for this opportunity. It was a lot of fun. Bye, friends.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.